volume control. It's all good. All right. So how many of you ended up, changing most of your passwords, at least with online banking and all the important websites? Okay. All right, so let's go to, I'm going to the class homepage right now just to show you the new homework assignment. The new one is in topic, it's in topic 5, it's called GPG. Which one do I need to reset the time again? Ownership and permissions? That's the one? Okay. So let me change the settings. And, oh, okay, I see. So I'll set it to the 24th, which is Thursday. Would that give you guys enough time? That should be okay. All right, so I'm gonna set the time to 5:20, which is right before when this class starts.
Could we have it at 12 o'clock at night?
The midnight?
Yeah, could we have it at midnight?
Well, I'm giving you until Thursday, so that's plenty of time.
Okay.
It's not today.
Good.
Yep. All right. So, are there any questions about this one? Ownership and permissions for people who have attempted it. Were there any issues? Any problems?
I just realized that I don't have a grade on it even though I did it.
Sorry?
My grade's not on it even though I did it.
Your grade is.
It's not on it.
Your grade is not on it. Yeah, because once I change the time, it's gonna, it will only release your grade after the due date.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Any other issues with this one? No other issues? Okay. So we have this new one. This is a new homework assignment. It's basically based on the one that I did, like a few years ago. But I changed the format, so it is now in the form of a quiz, which is the same as all of the other homework assignments. What we are going to do next is to talk about ClamFS. There's no homework assignment yet for ClamFS. We're just going to talk about it at this point. Yep.
Is there a high, what's it called, a false positive in Clam?
I think Clam has a, it's not really quote unquote the best antivirus program out there, but it's the one that is usually packaged with most distributions of Linux. So that's why I'm kind of just going to use it and talk about it. All right. So the first section is talking about whether you can get malicious software in Linux. And the answer is, well, it's an operating system, it's written by people, and it's going to have bugs, it's going to have security holes. The open SSL thing, I think it's just an illustration of, how open source, software can end up with, basically big security holes as well, as non-open source or proprietary software. So the thing that most people think, or what open source people usually would emphasize, that open source software is more secure, is not entirely true. Okay, and I think a lot of this has to do with end users as well. So it's not really just the tool; it's how people use the tool that makes the difference. Okay, in other words, someone can design cars to be as safe as possible, but if you have a drunk driving behind the wheels, all bets are off. I mean, the safety is not going to help, because the person who is driving the car is not is driving under the influence. Now, the only reason why, well, not the only reason, but one of the many reasons, but this one is more important. The reason why Linux computers are less targeted by malware has to do with the percentage of its user base. In other words, with a user base of, I don't know what is the percentage now, but I know it is not going to be much. Okay, let's be generous and give it 2%. Okay, so let's assume that 2% of all personal computers, not counting servers, but just personal computers, are running Linux. Okay, the other 98% will be running either Mac OS X or Windows. And you're looking from the perspective of a hacker, someone who wants to write malware to break into someone else's computer, would you spend the time to attack those 2% of computers before you write any malware to attack the other 98%? Well, maybe after you own the other 98% of computers, then you'll move, and go, okay, let's own those 2 extra percent, okay? Because I got time on my hand.
Even if you do, like, 2% are highly fragmented too.
Those 2% are highly fragmented, and you have some really good users within those 2%. So when you attack, those 2%, the chances of, actually, being sneaky and not getting noticed is pretty low. Okay. So that's why, that's partially why Linux computers, especially desktop computers, tend to have a lower percentage of getting infected and getting attacked by other computers. Excuse me. The concept of Rootkit was first experimented on a Unix-like operating system, and the reason why we know is because it is called a rootkit. Okay, why do you think it's called a rootkit? Well, it's because of root. Okay, now root has 2 meanings in Linux or Unix type operating systems. We talked about this a few times. It refers to the administrator account root, but it can also refer to the root folder, which is the source, the top level folder of the entire thing. But the rootkit is, well, we'll explain what a rootkit is later on, but the origination of rootkit comes from Unix type operating system and not from Windows. Excuse me. So the first thing we do is to talk about rootkit a little bit, and we start with the nature of rootkits. Okay, what exactly is a rootkit? You can look it up using Wikipedia right now, but if you want to summarize, if someone wants to summarize what a rootkit is, what would that be? What would that one sentence be? Any suggestions? Well, I mean, I have it written here, so I can just read it. I just want to see if you guys want to give me a one-sentence summary of what a rootkit is. A rootkit replaces certain components of an operating system to make itself invisible. Okay, that really is the key of a rootkit. It is actually replacing components inside the operating system, and the purpose of a rootkit is to basically make certain things invisible to the rest of the system, including your virus scanners and all the other software that you typically would use to identify a problem. Okay, that's the purpose of a rootkit. It's basically a camouflage kit, for computers, to basically hide other stuff that you might want to put into it. Now, I have an example here. If the ls command, which is the command to list files, is replaced, it can basically make some files in a malware package invisible. In other words, you can rewrite ls as a command and say, when I see file names like these, I do not report it at all. Okay, so if a particular program uses ls to look at all the file names and use that as a clue of whether your computer is infected, this replaced ls command will defeat all of those programs, because they just won't even show up. For the same reason, ps is another command that is kind of sensitive, because ps can list all the active processes in the system at any particular time. A process, once again, is a program in execution. If your computer is actively being infected, or it has a malware running at a time, ps usually will list that process, okay, because it is a program in execution. If ps as a command is replaced, then it won't show it anymore. Okay, you can do it ps dash uppercase a lowercase f, and the virus processes, or the processes corresponding to viruses or worms or malware of any kind, doesn't even show up, because you can hide it using when this command is replaced. And same thing with top. And we are talking about, when we talk about these 3 commands, ls, ps, and top, this is a fairly entry-level type of rootkit, okay? Because a lot of software do not rely on these particular programs to figure out, what is in your system. We can replace, more core portions of the kernel, including parts of the file system if possible, and that will basically really make certain things invisible to any type of antivirus program. A rootkit can replace a multitude of CLI command line interface commands and surface daemons. That is more dangerous. Okay, the first one is bad, but the second one is more dangerous, because when you replace surface daemons, programs that run in the background providing services, that is more problematic, because the first one, the CLI commands, is still mostly intended for an end user to use. Okay, most of the automated programs have different ways of doing things, and it's pretty hard to have a universal attack that works on all programs. But when you start to replace surface daemons in the background, then you're starting to have much more serious issues. Just as a historical thing, does anyone remember, what is the relationship between Rootkit and Sony? Sony, the entertainment company.
They had a controversial rootkit on their CDs.
Yep. That one, I just want to bring it up, because I want to show you guys, how a rootkit can be installed on the computer. Now, this is not in Linux, okay? It's for Windows. So if you look up, Windows, Sony, rootkit, the first one, the first one is a Wikipedia page, which pretty much, describes what happened. And I'll just go ahead and locate the key sentences here. You can read the rest. The Sony BMG CD copyright rootkit scandal concerned this deceptive, illegal, and potentially harmful copy protection measures implemented by Sony on about 22 million CDs. We are not talking about CDs that has software they can install. We are talking about typical run-of-the-mill music CDs. You buy those CDs, you put it into a CD player at the time, and it just plays music. So Sony found a way to basically embed an installer within the CD to install a rootkit. And the purpose of the rootkit was really not to infect the computer, but to check how people use a computer. Are you making copies of the CD and so on and so forth. But what happened was that particular rootkit also made it possible for other malicious software to be hidden and not be found. So you have to kind of read this entire thing and basically see how Sony got into basically big trouble over this one. Okay, but it is a classic case of a rootkit infection or a rootkit installation on the computer, even though it's not Linux. In this case, it is in Windows. Now, how does a rootkit get installed? That's the next question. The replacement of system commands, daemons, and drivers cannot usually be done by a regular computer, a regular user. In other words, I'm logged in as user right now. I opened up a command line, a terminal, and I can go to usr/bin, which is typically where most user commands are stored. If you do an ls right here, you can actually find ls itself. Oh, I guess not. You can find most of the commands here. Typically used by a system. So let me just find one that is kind of typical. Some commands are not external. Okay, WC is a word count program, and it's here. So if I want to replace one of these commands, I can try to use a copy command, or I can move something into here, or try to remove it, but I can't. If I try to do a rm pg, which is a file here, and it just says, even if I say, yes, go ahead and remove the write protected regular file, I cannot do it because permission is denied. Okay, and the reason is quite simple. If you do a ls-l on the file that I was trying to remove, you can see that the user ownership is root, which means the user owner is root, the root user of the system. The root user is root as well, but I am not a member of the group called root. Okay, so I am actually other from the perspective of this particular file. When you look at the permission of this particular file, only the root user has permission to write to the file, to overwrite this file. Okay, But to overwrite or to move a file or to replace a file is not really an issue with the file itself, it is an issue with the folder containing the file. So what I really should be using is ls-ld, which shows the details of the folder itself, directory itself, of the current folder, and you can see it's the same thing. Okay, this one is a folder because there's a D at the beginning, so it's a directory. But you can also see here that only root as a user has write permission to basically create new files or to replace existing files. As a regular user, I cannot do it. Even if I add myself to the root group, I still cannot do it because the root group user, which is the second item here, corresponding to r-x here, still does not have the right permission to overwrite files or to replace files. So that means it's pretty difficult for a normal person, a normal user, to replace core components of the operating system. Are we still doing okay at this point? Okay. When you have Windows, XP Home, or just about any home version of Windows, and you are the first user set up in the system, what are you? Are you a regular user or are you an administrator? You are an administrator. So you would have access to change some of the more important files in the system, even though your name is not administrator, you're not root in Windows, and yet the regular user, the first user you set up in the home edition of Windows XP all the way up to Windows 8, already has certain exposure. But in Linux, that is typically not the case. Okay, typically not the case. So even if a particular user account is compromised, an attacker cannot install a rootkit. It doesn't mean that the even hacked as a regular user, nothing bad will happen. Bad things can still happen. Okay, if your browser is compromised, really bad things can still happen. But you cannot replace certain core components of an operating system being a user. To install a rootkit, an intruder must somehow gain root user privilege. Okay, that is a core component of a rootkit, of having a rootkit installed. This can be done by mainly two methods. The first method involves the intruder compromising the root account itself or an account that can sudo as root. Okay, so basically your root account password is weak and somehow someone can get into the system to begin with. Because the first thing you need to do when you install SSH is to not allow root from logging in directly through SSH. So once you cut that off, that means someone has to log in as root through some other means, and that is it's not likely to happen. Okay, it has to do with poor choices of password on at least two accounts to do this. Okay, root account itself has a weak password, and then you have another weak account with a weak password to let someone log in the first place. It can also be done through network sniffing, but that's assuming people use insecure networking protocols like FTP without going through SSL or Telnet without going through SSL. The second method involves system services that have security holes basically. Some system services run with root privileges. Okay, now what that means is a program, a process is already running with root privileges. So if you have a way to trick that program into doing something that program is not supposed to do, then you have a chance of running arbitrary code as root. Okay. So just to give you an idea of what some of those services look like, we can easily do that. Okay, we can easily list all the processes, and anything that has root here as UID, those programs are all running as root, or root is the user running these particular programs. So udevd, the daemon for user space device manager is one of those. We have, let's see here, rsyslog is one of the other ones. MDADM, which is for a basically software RAID implementation, is one of those programs. Cron is one of those programs, and so on. So we do have a lot of programs running as root. If there's a way to trick one of these programs to run arbitrary code, then a rootkit can potentially be installed. Okay. Are there any questions at this point? No questions? How do you? Yeah, go ahead.
So you said that the programs that are running with root privileges can potentially be used to hack into root.
Those are all potential entry points for a hacker.
So if someone were running Wireshark instead of TCP/IP dump as root, someone could hack the Wireshark program to gain access to the system.
Potentially, yes. But any program that is running as root potentially is a security risk, to gain root privileges from a hacker's perspective. So what a hacker would do is to go through these programs and try to figure out which one potentially has the largest potential of having a security hole.
What was the command that you typed in to run?
This is the command ps-uppercase A, lowercase f, and I just pipe it to less so I can page up and page down. Okay. So what do you think? What do you think is one of the many ways to trick a program to do something that it is not supposed to? Has anyone heard of buffer overflow, buffer overrun exploits, or stack overflow exploits? Okay. Does anyone know how that works? Did I explain that earlier in previous classes? Okay. So that's those are basically entry points into hacking your system and gaining root privileges at the same time. And with that one, there's really not a whole lot you can do to stop the invasion, because it's probably not easy for you to spot security issues with programs that are already installed in your system. So in that case, your only defense is to detect that a rootkit has been installed already after the fact and say, okay, this system is now compromised. I have to basically stop using it and I have to clean it up. So how do you detect that the system has a rootkit installed already? Rootkits are particularly difficult to detect in the infected environment itself, because that's the sole purpose of a rootkit, is to hide itself along with some other stuff that can go along with the rootkit. Okay, so it's almost always the case. If you try to detect that a particular operating system is already infected using the infected operating system, it's almost 99% of the time it's going to fail. Okay, because that's what it's designed to do, is to hide itself, right? So the only way to do that is to boot your system with a live CD or something along that line, a live DVD, a live CD, a live USB drive with a clean operating system. Then you can go through and scan the entire disk to see if any file is replaced and see whether the replacement is reasonable or not. There are a few programs that can do that. We have AID and Tripwire. These are checksum monitoring programs that can be run periodically to detect changes of programs and library files. So what they do is they initially, when you install it, it will run itself and then compute an MD5 checksum or some other checksum for all of the files, all of the important files in the system, and it will store all of that the checksums into a particular file. And when you run it again, it will basically recompute all the checksums, and when the checksums of the files do not match what they're supposed to be, it will be reported to you and say, okay, this file is not having the correct checksum. Now, it does not mean that you have a rootkit installed. Sometimes it is just a fact that you have updated your operating system and forgetting to rerun AID or Tripwire to update its internal database. Okay, most of the time it's just a user error like that. Both of these were packages in Debian Linux system. I'm not 100% sure whether they still are or not, but they were packages. Yep.
There's also RK Hunter,
Which one?
RK Hunter. It compares it to the database of good checksums.
RK Hunter. Yep. So all of these are potential, but it works basically the same way. It still maintains a checksum, which means every time you update the operating system, you will have to run RK Hunter again and update its database. Here's another one, Samhain is another checksum-based monitoring system designed for intrusion detection. It takes monitoring to the next step by offering network monitoring ability and assigning of important database entries, which means you cannot fake it anymore. Okay, the first one, the first two programs, 8 and Tripwire, without the ability to sign a MD5 checksum, it also means that as a part of the rootkit, it can hide itself by altering the stored checksums to match the actual checksum of the files. So it is useless, if a malicious software has the ability to change the database storing the MD5 checksums. So the second program, with the ability to sign all of those checksums, is giving you an extra level of protection, because with the process of signing that we talked about in GPG discussion, with that process, it is much more difficult to fake a signature of an MD5 checksum. Are we still doing okay so far? Okay. Stealth is a checksum monitor that is designed to work with remotely checking the integrity of a system through SSH. So that can be very handy because you don't have to be on the system in order to do the checksum. All checksum monitors rely on a clean baseline installation. In other words, when the system was first installed, the checksum database should be created and saved on some form of read-only storage for further reference. Because if it's not installed in read-only storage, especially for the first two programs, then a malicious program can change that database to make it match. Okay, to make the checksum match the files that have been replaced already. So the question now is, what if a system does not have a baseline checksum database when it was first installed? Then how do we fix it? How do we check to see whether there's a rootkit installed already in the system? Which applies to many systems, because not a whole lot of people would install a checksum or a rootkit detection package when they first install the system. The first method is to create a clean installation on a separate system, potentially a virtual machine, run the checksum monitor program on the clean system, and then import the database to the production system. In other words, you're creating a sister system with exactly the same setup, so they will have to run the same distro, the same versions of everything, and then you can use the clean system to create the checksum, and then use that checksum created from a clean system to cross-check the checksum of files in the other system that is already running. Does everybody understand the concept? Yes, or is it okay? The second way to do it, where is it? This method will generally generate a long list of differences because the stock system used for reference purposes may not include all the customization of the production system. So that means the production system may have some customization done already, and a stock system may not have those particular files. The second method is to run the monitor on the production system directly. This approach relies on the assumption that the system is still clean by the time you run the monitor, and you're still running a risk in this case, because what if the system is already compromised when you install the checksum monitoring system? Then it won't be able to do a single thing. Here's RK Hunter. More specific detectors for rootkit installed check rootkit and RK Hunter. These programs look for signatures of known rootkits and signs that a rootkit is installed. So they're not exactly relying only on MD5 checksums of files. They are actually looking for signatures of rootkits themselves. While these programs are not effective against new and unknown rootkits, they are still effective against rootkits that are already in circulation. So you do have quite a few choices, with rootkits. But once again, in order to detect a rootkit, you don't want to run the rootkit detection mechanism on the system that is already suspected of being infected already. All right. Are there any questions about this particular slide? Questions? Okay. Well, let me ask you this question then. What do you think this has to do with the heart bleed issue that we were having in the past 2 or 3 weeks? Is it even related or not?
The SSL was not breached, it was just designed poorly, correct?
Correct. Because OpenSSL, but the breach that was detected was just that it is disclosing certain content in the memory of OpenSSL, but it's not allowing access to the system. So the only entry point, or the only way it can be related to this, is somehow in OpenSSL you can get the root password, and that is still possible because you can run Telnet through SSL. And if you run Telnet through SSL and you allow someone to log in directly through Telnet, then you can potentially use that heartbleed security hole to gain the root password through the window that is open.
Now, could you hide the old version of OpenSSL and the user would then think they've updated, but really the old one's running? Would that be like a rootkit, basically? Hiding the old version, looking like the new, updated, with the old closed?
That's an interesting one. You can't do that, because you can basically rewrite OpenSSL so that that particular security hole is plugged. But the whole point is, once you can install a rootkit, you can do all kinds of backdoors and whatnot. There's no need to basically hide the fact that OpenSSL itself is not fixed, because you can go through many other ways to further your infection into the system. But it is still possible because OpenSSL is really just an SSL, which is a secure socket layer implementation. And if you run Telnet through SSL, it will still have to go through OpenSSL. And if you log in through Telnet as root, then potentially that password can still be visible through that bug. So that's why the OpenSSL issue is really huge, because it is affecting not only a particular program or a particular server. Anything that goes through SSL can potentially have that problem, can have passwords exposed. Okay, next one, the next item talks about viruses. So what is a virus? A virus is malicious code that is attached to some otherwise seemingly legitimate files. That's basically what a virus is. Virus code is activated when the infected file is opened, quote unquote opened, by an executable. Once activated, virus code can perform a variety of malicious functions. Now the key sentence here is it is only active, it's only doing something when the file is opened using an executable of some kind, like a Word file that can be infected. But that infected file doesn't do a single thing until you double click it and have Word to open that file. Then you activate the code in the virus, and then you can do all kinds of stuff. Okay, so it's not active until the file is open, which also means a virus does not run by itself. Okay, it is not a worm; it is a virus. It relies on the target vulnerable program to activate the malicious code. In many cases, what this program can be just about anything. It can be a browser, it can be Microsoft Word, which doesn't apply to Linux systems, but it can be LibreOffice, for instance. It can be Acrobat Reader. Okay, how frequently is Acrobat Reader updated on your system, Linux or otherwise? Lots, right? Can be Java. How frequently is Java updated for security reasons? Frequent, right? So all of those programs fall into this category. Okay, so a virus is basically a file that contains malicious payload, but it has to be opened by a program in order to activate it. The extent of damage of a virus can range from user account hacking to system-wide compromise. Stuxnet is a prime example. Okay, the payload of the Stuxnet virus is not to target end user accounts. It's not to even to gain into. It's not to compromise the system that is running that is infecting. It's to compromise controllers that are connected to the network of the host computer. Did I explain that one? Stuxnet in this class? Nope. Okay. Okay. First of all, I will show you a web page so that you have that as a reference in case you want to read more about it. It's a really, really long page, so I'm not going to read that in this class. It does not apply to Linux directly, but for anyone who wants to kind of learn more about Stuxnet, it is actually a computer worm, but that's because it is actively going out to destroy stuff. Just go ahead and read the entire thing. It's really quite interesting because it has the payload of Stuxnet is to shut down uranium refinement. So the question is, how do you infect a computer, starting with a single computer running Windows? How do you shut down a nuclear plant selectively just to stop the production of refined uranium? So you have to read this thing. It's really quite interesting. Whoever wrote it, was definitely professional. Okay, that's one word to. Oh, it's a team of professionals, because they made it so that the effect on the nuclear plant is not obvious at first glance. Okay, it was damaging equipment in a very subversive way that is really hard to detect. The Iranians, found out, after the fact, what was happening. It was really quick too. I mean, those guys figured it out relatively quickly. But nonetheless, this particular bug or worm is really kind of interesting, for studying purposes. Vectors. The key vector of a virus infection is opening files that are downloaded from a network, mostly the internet. Other vectors also include flash drives and CDs and DVDs, which affect Windows more so than Linux, because in Windows you have the auto run file, and if your Windows installation does not have that feature disabled, someone can put a payload, specify the auto run file, and the moment you plug that USB thumb drive into your system, it runs. It doesn't give you a chance to stop it. It doesn't say, would you like to run this file, or would you want to stop this file from running? Nope, it just runs. Okay. But I would say, for most people, for client computers, this is the key. Okay, just getting something from the network is the key issue here. So how do you detect virus or files that contain viruses? There are several methods to do it. The most obvious one are the plugins into browsers and also email clients, because those are the main entry points of viruses. Thunderbird has a plugin called ClamDrib that scans attachment for viruses. Firefox only has an older plugin to integrate ClamAV for viruses. So you can do an integration with your email client program or your web browser program. Now this has limitations. A more complete method to scan for virus is ClamFS. ClamFS stands for Clam File System. It's a file system that relies on ClamAV, Clam Antivirus. That's what the AV stands for, to scan for viruses. The cool part of this is it is scanning on demand. Okay, it doesn't scan every single file. It only scans a file when you're ready or when you're about to open it. Okay, that's really the cool part of this. ClamFS is a scanning solution that is unique to Linux and other type of Unix type operating system because it requires the use of Fuse or file system in user space. Fuse makes it possible or easy to create the pretense of a file system without requiring a lot of administrator duties. In other words, an end user can set this up once ClamFS is already installed in the system. And last but not least, one can always use ClamAV to actively scan files and folders, install the package, and then use the commands ClamScan to scan specific files. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at how this works. I'm just opening up this terminal here, and I have Clam scan already installed here. So clam scan is pretty easy. You can just type clam scan and then press the enter key. And when you press the enter key without doing anything else, clam scan is now scanning the current folder and all the subfolders thereof. Okay, so it's scanning recursively, within the current folder, and nothing happens. Nothing is really suspicious in this case. So it is telling me that in its database currently, it has 3.3 million or so viruses already known. The engine is 0.98.1. It has scanned 41 files, and there's nothing suspicious. It could not find anything. So I take it back. It is not recursive by itself. You have to specify -R to make it recursive. So if you do a man clam scan, you can see what it does. So to make it recursive, you have to type in the -R to make it recursive. Without that, it is not recursive by its very nature. Are there any questions about how to use clam scan just to scan a single file? You can also target a particular file. You can say clam scan and then give it a file to scan. So I'm going to give it a particular file to scan here. And let's see. Okay, well, I'll have it scan this particular ODS file, which is an open document, spreadsheet file, and it will just it will scan only that file in this case. And there's nothing, nothing found. It's clean. Okay, so you can scan a single file, but scanning a single file is not going to be helpful. So what we want to do is to figure out how to use clamfs. But we'll finish this slide first. General preventive measures, so your system doesn't get infected or get malware infection. The first one is to install Bastille. We'll talk about this later on. The use of strong password. Now, how do you know a password is strong? How do you gauge that your password is strong? Go ahead. Sorry?
The amount of entropy it has.
Amount of entropy? How do you gauge that?
I usually just use doesn't matter, just type in something similar, see if it's actually a strong password.
Okay, that's one way to do it.
Letters, capitals, symbols, things that aren't usually guessed.
Things that are somewhat random. Okay, as random as it gets, then it's stronger. But then you run into another problem. You cannot remember the password either.
That's why I think it's easier to do long passwords that are easy to remember, than add in a couple things like in the front or the end, which is remember it better.
I was talking about similar things. I think it was with Chris. We were talking about this the other day. I think passwords in general will be phased out eventually, because using a single static password to sign into a system is just not a secure way to do things. So what most people are now looking into, remember the thing about you are now in a hotel and you have to do something in a secure way, but you can only use the hotel computer to do something. Remember that example? So the question now is, how do you protect yourself from hotel employees from sniffing your password to log into the various systems that you have to sign into? Remember that when we talked about it? Okay. One thing you can use is what we call an OTP, one-time password. So a one-time password is basically pre-generated beforehand. So if you know that you have a business trip and you will be signing in from a hotel room where you can everything can be sniffed. Okay, they don't even need to sniff your network traffic because they can sniff your keyboard activity. They can sniff on screen what you're doing. Okay, so there's nothing that you can do that can hide your password or whatever that you have to use to sign into the system. So what you do is you pre-generate a whole bunch of OTP or one-time passwords, and then you use the one-time passwords to sign in. As the name implies, a one-time password means that once you use that one password once, it is invalid anymore after that point. Okay, so the hotel employees can sniff all they want. They can get your password, the OTP passwords, but the ones that you have used already in the system is useless to anyone who wants to reuse it. So the OTP is one way to do it, and then the second one is to use I cannot remember the name of that technology. How do you call that little card thing that people use? And it has a code that changes with time. What is the name of that thing?
RSA key thing.
It's like but what is the name of that authentication method?
It's like a modulator or something.
Token. It's a token. Token is one of the names, but the technical name is not. It's right at the tip of my tongue, and I cannot remember. Okay. Second factor password. Two-factor. That's it. Okay. So the key word to look up, we are not going to get into this too much, but for people who are really kind of concerned or want to experiment with this sort of thing, it's called a two-step or two-factor authentication. That's basically combining a typical password that you use along with a factor that is not easily sniffed. Okay, and a little key card thing, the token thing, is one of these mechanisms. But there was a big issue with that. I think somebody stole the key to generate the RSA tokens once, and then they had to reissue all of those little card things. There was one time they were basically hacked. So they still have exposure like that. But a two-step verification process basically means even if someone can sniff your password, they still need to get a second factor to sign into your system, so you're still relatively secure even if your password is sniffed. So that's something that you might want to look into if you encounter situations like that a lot. You'll be on the road traveling. You have to use an untrusted computer to sign into some system. This is something that you might want to look into.
But that's only relevant to like Linux. I mean, Gmail doesn't have that option, right? It's kind of.
I don't know. I think Gmail is starting to have it, because I know Amazon is starting to have it too. They don't publicize it, but I think they might have an engine to do it already. Okay, two-step verification. So let me see.
Yeah, that's the one where it texts you that.
Sorry, say again?
Yeah, it sends you a text message with a little code on there.
Right. But it still helps,
Yeah.
assuming your phone is still yours. So there are different ways to do it, and this is an interesting program. It simply has a name of John. Okay. Why do you think it has a name of John? John the Ripper. Yep. And what this file does, what this program does, is it will go through the shadow password files, and it will basically try to crack the passwords of based on that file. So if your system is still relying on the shadow file to store the encrypted passwords, or the passwords, the hash of a password, John can do a pretty good job with cracking common passwords. The only reason why I know this is because years ago the Moodle server was a computer under my desk, and I had John installed to run it once a week to locate weak passwords. And one of the professors using Moodle at the time, I cannot name the professor nor where he works, but basically his password was weak. It was weak enough that John was able to crack it in 2 hours. And then after email after email after email that I sent to that professor, he still kind of he did not change his password. So I'm not sure whether he's still using the same password or not. But it was definitely one of the weaker passwords because John can crack it. And I had a really crappy dual core system too. So it's not like I'm running a 16 core system to crack the password. I was running a fairly weak system, and it was able to crack the password in 2 hours.
That's darn weak.
That is weak. Yep.
Was it like 3-4 characters?
No, it was kind of long, but it was a common word, or a string of common words.
Dictionary word?
Dictionary, but it wasn't exactly dictionary, but it was close enough that John was able to find a permutation that matches it. John probably can find permutations because a lot of people think, okay, I'll just replace O with a 0, I'll replace an I with a 1, or so, something like that. Those are not particularly secure because the replacement pattern is already known. So a dictionary attack, can also go through those permutations to basically try it out. Like John, John. The next thing most dictionary attack would use is J0HN. Okay, because a lot of people think I will replace an O with a 0. That makes it more secure. Not really the case. No plain text username and password transmission. This is a big thing. So that means quite a few things. Do not use Telnet unless it is over SSL. Do not use FTP unless it's over SSL. But with the open SSL thing, even that is not really secure anymore. Don't use HTTP unless it's HTTPS, because all of these protocols by themselves use plain text to transmit data. There are also less obvious protocols that can also transmit, usernames and passwords. Email protocols like POP3, IMAP, and SMTP. They are all, they can. If these are not encrypted and you're transmitting your password and username, using these protocols, it is just as harmful as FTP, HTTP, and Telnet. Okay, because it is still going through the network. Multiple people can tap into your network and sniff it out. SMB and NFS, both of these are networked file systems. They are also known to have insecure authentication. They can transmit username and passwords in plain text. Okay, there is the option to do it. If I remember correctly, in SMB, if you have an older system using Windows, then you cannot use encrypted password, because the older versions of Windows, I think it's Windows 95, it does not support password and username encryption. So, that's more reason to update your system so you don't run Windows 98 anymore. Is anyone still running Windows 98 for one reason or another? No? Guess who does? Yep, go ahead.
Actually, some of the CNC that work still run it. We have machinery that, because of the PLCs and things, that has to run that software.
But are they networked?
They are on an isolated network, so they regularly get bad things in them, but we have them separated from our other networks.
So have you seen those machines, machining something that is obscene or?
No, but we've definitely had things where network monitoring tools to see lots of
bad stuff going on. Oh boy.
So we have to swap out the drive and wait for it to happen again.
So you have to basically clone the hard drive, with a clean system, and then periodically.
We have backup machines ready to go, so we can unhook it, plug in another machine. It happens maybe once a year that one of them gets real bad.
Wow.
But the hardware, there's specific hardware. There's a card inside the machine that nobody's figured out yet how to get it to work with the updated OS.
No, it's not going to work. Stop looking. Microsoft is not well known to maintain backward compatibility when it comes to drivers. So unless the manufacturer of that card is willing to rewrite the driver to target newer operating systems from Microsoft, it's not going to happen. So you will have to run it, on that machine, pretty much forever. The only option that you might have to make it somewhat more secure and being able to run it on a newer system is to run it through VirtualBox and then have the hardware to pass through VirtualBox. Whether you can pass it whether you can pass through just a regular, like ISA bus, card or not, I'm not sure. I know you can pass USB devices through to a virtual machine, but when you're talking about ISA bus, type of devices, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we just keep them off, no internet access unless a vendor needs to give it to do something. That's when we all get scared because we have to open it up for PC Anywhere or something for a minute. Thinks the viruses come in.
Well, ironically, you are not alone, in this type of situation. What is the name of the agency that checks, baggages and bags at the airport? Is it
TSA.
DSA? Okay. So DSA, Windows. Huh? TSA, sorry. Transportation, right? Transportation. TSA, Windows 98. That should find it. There we go. I mean, once you find TSA Windows 98, you will find a whole bunch of articles on the same thing. Basically, they run into the same problem as your shop, because the hardware was so specialized that it would only run on those particular machines, and it's easily hacked. But in this case, the TSA made these machines not networked. So if you want to hack a machine like that, you really have to walk up to the machine in order to do something. And most people probably would hesitate to approach a TSA, X-ray machine at the airport when it's, guarded by armed people. But they're still running an old operating system because they could not get the software to work on a newer operating system. All right, so that's cool. So if you do need to go, if you do need to use POP3 or IMAP or SMTP, all of these protocols can go through SSL. But obviously, with the open SSL security flaw, it's not going to be that helpful. Because now I just watched The Hobbit, over the break. So OpenSSL is kind of the ring, the one ring. Because all of the other rings are kind of like SMTP, POP3, Telnet, FTP, and so on. So they're all kind of individually not very secure, but you can make all of them secure using OpenSSL. But now that you have this one ring being insecure itself, then all of the other rings are now out, under the control of whoever has control over that one ring. And it's basically what happens in the case of the heartbleed issue, which is kind of funny, but not really funny.
I think the OpenSSL team, they're unpaid volunteers. If you look at how many people use OpenSSL, I think when you look at the amount of donations, only they receive maybe $2,000 a year.
Yeah, they're practically not paid.
Yeah,
they're practically not paid.
And it's a small team too.
Yep. The other thing you can do is to not allow browser plugins. That's a big thing. I mean, the plugins of browsers is a big issue, and sometimes they get installed, kind of in a very underhanded way. You click on that one sign saying, do not install this, and they turn out to be installing it, right? So it's user, end user issues in this case. Use ClamFS for browser cache. This is actually interesting. We will have an exercise like this. I'm still thinking about how to do this part, because to do this part means that you have to get a browser installed. So we may or may not be able to do it. Okay, so the bottom line is your browser has two folders that are very special to it. One is the download folder, and the other one is the cache folder. The cache folder is basically where your browser will cache a lot of the bitmaps, a lot of the files that you need to get again and again from a browser to speed up access to a website. So that's the cache directory. The other one is the download directory, where by default most browsers will try to download files into the downloads folder. So those two folders are special. If you install ClamFS on top of those two folders, then every time you save a file, nothing is being done. But when that file is about to be opened, like if I download something and I'm clicking open this file, then it will be scanned on the fly at that point, automatically. You don't have to run clam scan at all. The fact that you're opening a file triggers the scanning process. Now, if the scan comes back positive and say that this file is infected, it will basically render the permission so that the file cannot be opened anymore. Okay, so it's kind of an automatic process. We will get an exercise to do this, but not through a browser, but you can probably understand the process, and when you have a browser installed, you can apply it to a browser. Minimize the number of root daemons. In other words, if you run the command like this, you can run it to locate all the processes and daemons that run with root privileges. Let's go ahead and do it. So we just copy and paste it. Oops. Paste. Go. Need to make the monitor a little bit wider. There we go. Okay, so this is a refinement of the other command because it only shows commands that are running as root. So when you go through this, you can basically say, okay, do we have to run this? Do we have to run this? Do we have to run this? As root. Some of these, yes. Some of these, no. Okay. Like Light DM is the Light Display Manager. You can have GDM as a GNU known display manager, or KDM as KDE display manager, but those are all kind of running in using root privileges. I have NMBD, that's for Samba implementation. We have a whole bunch of login daemons. You can't really shut those down. But basically, this gives you a list of things or processes that are being run with root privileges. If you see something suspicious here, you should definitely look it up and say, okay, what is that program? Why is it running with root privileges?
How do you really know what's suspicious about really knowing the Linux architecture? Right?
You can look at, if you use top, or if you just look at how much time it's consuming, any type of suspicious program will probably be kind of consuming a little bit of time, especially when you're doing browsing and whatnot. You have to kind of monitor that. Or the name itself, looks suspicious. Or it is, or you okay, this is the other thing you can do. So what you can also do is you look at this, with a clean system. Okay, so you basically take a snapshot of the type of processes that would normally run with a clean system. And you take a few snapshots like that, and so that you catch most of the processes or most of the daemons that you need to run when the system is clean. So you basically compare that, from time to time to your actual, system running, and see if there are any differences. If so, then you can look up, those particular names and say, okay, what is this? I mean, is this something that I installed? Is this something that I activated recently, or is it something that is suspicious? Because if you find it to be suspicious, you can at least clam scan that particular file. Hopefully, no rootkit has been installed to render clam scan useless. Okay. All right. So let's see. We're pretty much done here, and it's right on time too. So the next homework assignment is going to be on ClamFS, so that I can show you guys how to set up folders where virus scanning is on demand and automatic. There's no need to run clam scan manually to scan the files. Everything is going to be scanned as soon as you open a file. As soon as you try to copy a file, it's going to be scanned. Okay, so we'll talk about ClamFS in your next homework assignment. We will also have another one that you can use to install a rootkit detector. So RK Hunter is one of those, along with some of the other ones. So we'll definitely still have a few more experiments to run. With hardening Linux, since the virtual machine that we have installed is so minimal, there's really nothing to harden because it is not running a whole lot of stuff anyway. But we'll still go through the exercise of trying to harden the system because the process is interesting, it's useful. Are there any questions, any particular concerns, issues that you guys want to bring up? No, nothing? Okay, I have something to confess. I think I have, officially moved or changed from QEMU as an emulator to VirtualBox. As much as I do not like Oracle as a company, VirtualBox is a superior product. The reason I said that is because I'm running into a lot of issues with QEMU just locking up the system, locking up the host, not the virtual machine, and that is not good. I mean, that should never happen. But yet it's doing it. It's not doing it to one single machine. I try to do the same thing on multiple machines. It has to do with the distribution itself. But VirtualBox works flawlessly the entire time, so I cannot complain about that. So it's definitely a viable option to VMware and also QEMU. Just want to let you guys know about that. The other thing is VirtualBox used to not support USB pass-through. It does now, and it works really well too.
You have to install the non-free, I think it's like OS.
Yeah, you have to click an agreement to say that you're not commercial. But once you click that agreement, you can download the extension pack from Oracle, and then you can install it into your VirtualBox installation. And once you have that installed, you can pass through USB devices, and it works really well. I have a Wi-Fi card passing through to a virtual machine, and it works just perfectly. And then the other thing that's really nice about this is I have two identical Wi-Fi cards, one for the bare metal and the other one is for the virtual machine. With QEMU, there's no way to differentiate between the two because they have the same vendor ID and then they have the same product ID. Okay, QEMU does not give me the option to identify using bus location. VirtualBox, on the other hand, has an option to list all of the bus location. Then you can just say, okay, I want this particular card attached to the virtual machine, not the other one, which is already attached to bare metal. So it's just really nice. I'm used to much more archaic ways of doing things, and this one was like, wow, 2 clicks, I'm done. All right. So I'm done with the lecture, and I will see if there are any issues. A few people have reported issues with the encrypted partition when you first sign in using the virtual machine. The encrypted partition somehow is not accepting the original password for the encryption. How many people are encountering that problem?
Oh, okay. I thought it was me. I thought I was going to redo it soon, just to redo it.
Okay. But not in general?
Yeah.
So, because I'm not seeing that problem myself, all of those steps, I'm using for my... I did it first, and then I wrote down, what I did for your homework assignment. So I'm not encountering those problems.
I wonder if I just typed it, that password at the same time, wrong or something, maybe.
That can be an issue. Okay, but one more thing, because if you use a keyboard like this, make sure that when you type in the numbers, do not use the numpad. Okay, that can be one of the main issues. So if you have that issue of not being able to decrypt the partition, make sure that you did not use or do not use the numpad for entering numbers, because the numpad does not necessarily translate to the digits. That's the issue.
Or try it with the number
Sorry?
key
That's
on.
good to know.
Yep.
So, what do you want to do about it?
You need to unlock the first one, right? So you have to get that one done
That
first.
one.
Yeah. All right. And I thought that I extended this one.
You extended it until the end of that night, but I didn't have a computer that night, so.
So,
Okay.
was there a solution to it?
All right. What's your name?
Oh, I don't know. I
Chad.
was planning to redo the whole thing just to see if it'll work again.
You mean reinstall the virtual?
Yeah. Because at
All
first I
right,
thought I just
so-
typed
Can
it
you also
wrong
do
twice or
for
something,
me?
and then I just forgot
Okay.
because
Oh, you forgot the actual.
I just guessed
Oh, no,
because I
remembered it,
didn't
but
have
I'm assuming. I just assumed that
have
I
time
did it
to
wrong twice. That's why
because I had a problem to install Linux. I just
Okay.
guessed and I didn't have time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I kept trying,
I
so
want
like,
to
oh,
retake.
whatever, I'll just-
Okay. What's
Yeah.
your name?
Sohail, S-O.
Yeah, then I kept trying.
Yeah, that was.
On me
I
too.
did it wrong. Maybe
I
like,
guess it has to be one at a time.
Yeah,
Actually,
I guess so.
But
Okay.
I
Only one user,
what
not
happened
users.
was that if I went in and I said,
Okay. Now,
if you conflict
since you lined up first, I'm
log in as root,
Okay, I
specify that.
can get it done tomorrow, but I won't have a computer tonight.
but I couldn't log in as
So if you
different
have it
users.
set
The
through
minute that I set
tomorrow night,
the
I'll get it done.
configuration for root login,
11:59.
Yep.
No.
So you have the entire tomorrow.
regardless the all the
You
passwords
have
are
my
the
word.
same for my Linux plugin.
Okay. No time limit.
Unlimited tabs,
Okay. So
and the others should be unlocked as soon as that's done. So,
Oh, really?
the
Well,
others
let me
should
know when
unlock.
you're done with this
Okay.
one.
For the root,
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Alright.
three more for the Vegas.
Okay.
That's you.
So-
The other two are those.
I tell some problems, you know.
Oh no,
I was
didn't do that.
in
I
the
forget.
office.
Okay.
I don't know if you're in the office then. I was
So
the
you
one
just
logged
recommend
in.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have we didn't have the right timetable on my door. That's why you know.
Yeah, because you told me to come half an hour before the class began. So that was why I came at the same time. But when I checked the appointment schedule, I saw that.
Okay.
Permission yet, so I don't
Okay,
really
so
know.
you have the same thing. You know, you have an entire day until tomorrow.
Okay. So another, you also resetted to the ownership and permission something. So I already took the exam. So I have to do once again or
No, the ones that you have done already, you do not have to redo. But this one, you know, I'm giving
Oh,
you.
okay, cool. Thank you.
Sure.
I tried.
Okay, so what do you want to do?
Actually, I wanted to show you
Uh-huh.
to see because it's not really like what I told you.
Right.
It's not accepting. Once I type in, it's not really.
But I just been playing with
Okay,
Python.
there can only be one thing because if it prompts you, that means the installation was successful. But the fact that it's not letting you through and re-prompt you for the password means that the password that you are now
Oh, yeah, I
entering
used
does
Codecademy
not
before. That
match
should
the
be
password that you
cool. I like
used
that. I thought
when you
about it.
encrypted
This
the
website.
partition.
You see the website?
No.
Now, how that can happen, I do not know
You can put Codecademy
because you know.
I don't know because I use uppercase, lowercase, and numbers.
Okay,
So I don't
and you
know.
did not
Maybe-
write it down.
I know. It's a simple password. It's normal.
Ah,
I use it
well,
for some of my some
Okay,
account.
but you could have
that's
missed
not
like
important.
one case, you know, or one letter, and because it doesn't echo back what you actually type.
I don't know. I've done this like 5 times.
Five times. Do you have digits? Did you use the numpad at all?
Let me get your email.
It's my
then.
laptop. I'm doing it on-
So it doesn't have a number. Okay, all right. That is just mysterious because it really.
It's just like
I
online
actually I wanted to
Python.
show it, or
Yeah.
maybe I should just
Oh, that's cool.
start
What
all
did
over
you-
again in
Oh,
your
Vincent.
presence. So maybe you say it.
Vincent Luke.
How long would it
Yeah,
take to
24.
go through the whole process?
At 24?
Oh no, 24.
Sorry?
At gmail.com.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
awesome. I'll send you an email. Are you
So you
busy
can do
Friday?
it during my office hour because my office hour is 1 hour. So if
Have
you
you ever seen
arrive
this place?
at 8 o'clock, then we can go through that
Oh yeah,
process.
yeah, I've been there.
Oh, you've been there?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Just find the day, let me know what day, and
So,
I'll be sure that I'll
We're
be here,
launching a hackathon.
Okay.
at that time.
Maybe can I check? Can I know your visiting hour on during the work days?
Oh cool.
Yeah, it's in the syllabus.
Oh thanks, appreciate that. Wait,
So,
is this like already like you're like
If you
one of the
look at
organizers or?
my-
is
Yeah,
it-
I'm one of the organizers.
Oh cool.
So if you
That's
like,
my office hour.
you can
Every
come,
day from 8 to 9,
9.
basically.
on Friday from 2 to 5. I'll be there.
Monday through
Yeah, I
Friday.
can
What about
show you around.
Friday
Okay,
is
that's
online.
online.
Yeah.
Okay, online. Okay.
But if you,
Hackathon?
we can arrange a
Or
time
I
on
just
Friday
send you
as
an
well
email
if you let me know
sign up
ahead of
when we
time.
start. It's in
Because I
June,
need
so
to do
right
this
after.
because he said his assignment is going to expire by
Oh, that's
Thursday.
perfect actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
So I need to do it from now
there's a
before
way to
Thursday.
get around that one. The encrypted partition is not really needed for the other homework assignments.
So
So
it's
what
up to
you can do
Oh,
is to
you
set
want me
up
to send
other
you
virtual
email, or do you
machines
wanna come
without the encrypted partition, and then get the other
Maybe you'll
homework
be
done
busy
first.
Friday.
I'm trying to think.
Okay.
I might be
You see what I mean?
My car on Friday.
So you
but,
set up,
okay.
you set up a different virtual
What- so
machine.
what
Do
organization
not use
are you,
encrypted
like,
partition
through? Is it
to
like
do the
just-
other
This is
homework.
Hacker Lab.
Okay.
Uh,
What about, it
Hacker
must
Rank
request
or
me
email.
to
Are you part of
log
Hacker
in
Rank or?
an
I'm part
encrypted
of
password
Hacker Lab.
because
Oh,
I did
okay.
that to
Oh,
see
do
if
you
I
work
can
for Hacker Lab
bypass
or-
password session, but
No, I didn't know
it
that.
was requesting for it.
Okay.
Small world.
So I don't really know how to go about it.
Yeah, so you basically want to set it up without using an encrypted partition.
Yeah, oh, but
Okay.
Hacker Lab, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I'll try.
Yeah, so this way at least you can move ahead with the other homework assignments
Okay.
and not worry
Oh,
about
cool,
this.
cool. What kind of
Okay, so-
hackathon is it?
Mm-hmm.
It's a hackathon